Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, guys. A quick check. Am I audible, visible, and can you see the screen?
Good afternoon, ma'am. Yes, you are audible and I can see the screen.
All right. I have a quick question in the chat box. Elsa, Maria. Yes, yes, that should be enough. 12 points are enough, Maria. All right. So let's get started. Most welcome. Let's get started with completion. Again, this is something that comes straight from your F8. Nothing much around here. We have completion and review. That is, till now we have planned our audit. We have done the ethics, right? And we have obtained the evidences that we needed, we analyzed the risk, etc. And now we are at the completion stage, right? And I think someone asked the question yesterday as to why we perform analytical procedures at the end. So, now is the time that we perform our completion activities. What are those activities? Firstly, we are going to talk a little bit about the subsequent events. What are subsequent events?
The events that take place after the year end, but before the financial statements are authorized for issue.
All right. What is the auditor's responsibility in case of subsequent events? Yes, Maria, perfect. What is the auditor's responsibility?
The auditor has an active duty. He has to keep a check. And he has to firstly classify if an event is an adjusting or a non-adjusting event.
That the responsibility of the auditor to classify events into subsequent and adjusting and non-adjusting event?
I think so, ma'am. I might be wrong.
The responsibility of the management to actually classify the events into adjusting and non-adjusting, and the auditor is going to review that. The auditor is always supposed to review what the management is doing. He's not going to do their work for them. That results in assuming management responsibilities, which the auditor is not supposed to do, because then later it will create a self-review threat as well, right? So that is not allowed. So basically, for subsequent events, till the time the auditor issues the audit report, he has an active duty. He has to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence in regards with subsequent events as well. But after the audit report has been issued, he does not have an active duty. He has what we call a passive duty. That is, he does not have to actively look for audit evidences, but if he comes to know about something from different sources, then yes, he should have skepticism and he should find out about it if he comes to know during the course of audit. But the active duty ends as in when he issues the the audit report, right? Do you all know what adjusting and non-adjusting events are? Because that is the distinction is important. Is there any need to elaborate on adjusting and non-adjusting events?
No, ma'am.
All right. Then we have evaluation of misstatements. Whatever misstatements you thought you have accumulated during the course of your audit, that has to be communicated to the management for them to look at it, have a look at it. Now they can choose to edit their financial statements, rectify the misstatements, or they can give you reasons as to, why a certain thing is a certain way. And then you have to evaluate the misstatements. Evaluation means that you have to understand whether it is material or not for the overall financial statements, material or not. And accordingly, then you will see whether it is pervasive or not, right? Now, according to that, then you issue an audit opinion that can be a modified report. A modified report can be of 3 types. You all have done that: qualified, adverse, and disclaimer of opinion. Or it can be an unmodified report as well. So after you have evaluated the misstatements, communicated the same to the management, you then take a call as to whether you're going to modify the audit report, or if it is not material enough to be modifying the audit report, right? Is that understood, the misstatements part?
Yes, ma'am.
Then we have going concern, right? Going concern is another important area that we look at. Okay. Now you have to just quickly tell me a few things here. Let's say the entity is a going concern. And this has been mentioned in the financial statements. So so they have said, the management has mentioned that the entity is a going concern in the accounting principles, right? So the same is mentioned in the financial statements. What kind of a report are you going to issue?
It's going to be unmodified, or it might be positively modified by a paragraph, that is the MURGC paragraph, that we will just bring the user's attention that the management has disclosed this in the financial statement. It's an MURGC paragraph under the basis of opinion. So it is a positively modified report.
Is that really needed? Because generally also see the entity is a going concern and the same is mentioned. When do you want to draw the attention of the users? When something is out of the ordinary. That's when the users might not pay attention regularly in the regular course. So that is why we want to draw their attention. But here it's pretty normal, right? So there won't be a need of any additional communication because it's just how it is normally. So you will have an unmodified opinion, right? If the entity is not a going concern, and this has been mentioned, same is mentioned in the financial statements, then what are you going to do?
If it is mentioned, it is still an unmodified opinion. No. If it isn't mentioned, then it would be a modified. It was adverse opinion.
It'll still be an unmodified opinion, but here we will have to communicate. We will have to draw the attention of the user. So it will be unmodified with additional communication. Right? Because it is not a going concern and the entity has mentioned that it is not a going concern. That means the financial statements are showing a true and fair view. So the opinion is going to be unmodified, but because it is not a going concern, we might have to draw the attention of the users to this fact. Right? Now, entity is a going concern. And let's say they have mentioned otherwise. They have said that the entity is not a going concern. Then
Ma'am, it's a modified opinion. It's an adverse opinion. Because it is a possessive matter.
Good. Modified opinion, and that would be an adverse opinion because this is pervasive. It extends throughout the financial statements. So you cannot issue a qualified or a disclaimer of opinion. You're going to issue an adverse opinion. And if entity is not a going concern, and again, they have mentioned otherwise, saying that the entity is a going concern, again, which opinion?
Same, right, ma'am? It is not a going concern and they mention it otherwise.
Yeah. It's not a going concern, but they've mentioned that it is a going concern.
So they've done something wrong.
They're not presenting.
It's not true and fair.
Correct. Not presenting a true and fair view. So an adverse opinion.
Ma'am, if if we get to know after the year end that it is certain events have happened because of which it is not a going concern now. Before it was while we were auditing it during the year end, but now due to certain circumstantial evidence, we found out that it is not a going concern. So in that case, what is the auditor's responsibility? Like if we find out it is because we still have an active duty. So we modify our opinion, right?
Yes.
And it then becomes an adjusting event.
It becomes an adjusting event because it's going to affect the users. And if that is not adjusted by the management, we are going to modify the opinion. If the management adjusts that in the financial statements, then we are going to give unmodified opinion with additional communication. Right? So this is important, guys. They sometimes ask you questions on going concern. So the concept should be very clear, you know. Sometimes the students tend to think that if the entity is not a going concern, we have to issue a modified opinion. But that is not the case, right? Our opinion does not depend on whether an entity is a going concern or not. Our opinion depends on whether it is disclosed in the financial statements or not. We do not care, honestly, about whether it's a going concern or not, as long as it's disclosed. If it's appropriately disclosed, unmodified opinion; not appropriately disclosed, modified opinion. That is how it works, right? Then we spoke about final analytical procedures. Now, final analytical procedures are just taking all your financial aspects and elements together, trying to make sense out of the different areas, see if all the evidences that you've obtained, all the financial ratios, they are kind of consistent. There is no inconsistency in the financial ratios that you've calculated, the financial areas that you've audited, right? So you take the financial statements as a cohesive whole and try and do the analytical procedures. That can be some trend analysis, right? It can be the industry analysis and all that, to make sure that whatever we have obtained during our course of audit, it is forming sense, it is making sense, and the audit has been completed appropriately, like it's done properly. And there's no contradiction between evidences that we need to have another look at. So that is going to be your final analytical procedures. Then we have review procedures, right? The engagement partner can perform the review procedures of the areas that are done by others. You all can check whether appropriate evidences, sufficient and appropriate evidences were obtained or not, the procedures were followed or not, the materiality limit was set or not, whether the sample size was appropriate, or do we have to, obtain more samples, and things like that. That will be in your review procedures. Written representations, as you know, again, these are obtained at the end of the audit. It is obtained from the management to make sure that whatever responsibilities are there, that of the management, it's written and obtained, right? So that we have a proof against the same. If later anything comes up, we have a proof for it. So for example, the management acknowledges its responsibility for disclosing all the information to the auditors. The management has disclosed all the known and suspected frauds to the auditors. So all this should be written, should be taken in writing from the management, right? And please make sure that the written representations, you have to remember, they are not very reliable evidences, because eventually they are obtained from the management, right? So you have to obtain written representation in along with some other evidence, in complementary, like these written representations should be, complementary to other evidences and not as standalone evidences. That you have to remember, that it should add to other evidences and not act like the only evidence, because if you pick that up, then you're not taking up enough and appropriate evidences, and plus there is no skepticism involved, right? Any questions so far? If not, please quickly read this slide. We've done this, we've done subsequent event. Please read this quickly. Yes, all done.
Yes, ma'am.
Moving on, going concern also we've discussed. Please quickly read this. Let me know if there are any questions. Yes, shall I move forward?
Yes, ma'am.
Overall review. What all do we consider when we are reviewing? Towards the end, we are taking the engagement partner will be doing this basically. Just take an overall review of whatever work has been done up till the point. Quickly read these questions. Done?
Yes, ma'am.
Then this is the process, right, of evaluating misstatements, the step-by-step approach. Again, we've discussed this. Quickly read. Let me know if there are any questions.
Done, ma'am.
Again, written representations. This was not done in detail in your AA, but here it is important, right? What are the general matters? What are the specific matters? And what are the matters required by international standards on audit in which we need to obtain written representations? So you have to read these matters. And also, like we discussed, you have to obtain the written representations that are required by the ISAs, but also remember that you cannot depend on the written representations completely. You have to obtain other evidences, and these should only be some additional events to corroborate your evidence and not as standalone evidences. That you have to remember, right? So read these matters. Are you all aware of the different matters for which we require written representations?
Done.
Someone else also? Perfect. Okay. Then we have auditor's report. Again, this has been done in your AA, but yes, more details coming up. So you all know the elements of an audit report, right? That is, we have the title that, you'll write that it is an auditor's report. So an audit report will be the title. Addressee will be the shareholders of the concerned company. Then you'll have your auditor's opinion that can be unmodified, modified. Maybe you have adverse, you have qualified, you have disclaimer. So whatever your opinion is, and accordingly your language will be, in our view, so and so company presents a true and fair view, or does not present a true and fair view, or we cannot comment upon the financial statements of this company because we are not able to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, whatever the opinion is. Then you have the basis for opinion paragraph, wherein you explain why you are giving whatever the opinion is. If it's an adverse opinion or if it's a qualified opinion, why that opinion, right? Why are you modifying the audit opinion? So there you mention the misstatements that you have found during the course of your audit. Then you have key audit matters. This is necessary if it's a listed entity. You have to mention the audit matters that in your opinion were very important or vital during the course of audit. So if you feel that revenue is a very important area, it's a highly volatile area, it's a risky area, or let's say payroll is a key audit area, that you will mention in this paragraph. Other information is basically, sometimes what happens is that these organizations, they release their financial statements along with some other information also. For example, the chairman's report, okay, that is also released. Now the auditor has to make sure, you have studied this before also, that we sometimes place restriction on who we are communicating the audit report to, right? So if you remember things like, you can be sued for negligence if a duty of care was owed, right? Duty of care was communicated that way. So in other information, since we have not audited the chairman's report, we will specifically mention that our liability is restricted only till the financial statements, and we are not responsible for any other information that is announced or that is released by the management. So that has to be very clear, so that you are specifically removing your duty of care from the chairman's report. So any other information which you have not audited will be mentioned in the other information paragraph. Then we have responsibilities of management, that is preparation of accounts is the responsibility of the management, right? Preparing it in accordance with the financial reporting framework. Preparing your financial statements in accordance with the laws and regulations, all that is the responsibility of the management, should be clearly stated in the audit report. Auditor's responsibility is to give an opinion, right? There can be some other responsibilities also depending on the country or the framework that you are in. For example, if you are in the US, you might have to report on the corporate governance of a particular company as well. So whatever are your other reporting responsibilities, that will also come in the next paragraph. Then you have the name of the engagement partner, the signature, the address of the audit firm, and the date, right? So this is the whole format of an auditor's report. Is that understood?
Yes, ma'am.
These are the additional communications. It is very important to note that these are not modifications. Your report will still be unmodified only, even after these 4 paragraphs, even if they are included, it will still be an unmodified report. Now, these are the 4 paragraphs that you have done in your F8. So I'm assuming you've done it and you know it. If there's any paragraph that you want me to explain, or anything that you've forgotten, please let me know. I'll explain that. Okay, since you are not asking any question, I'll ask you. Tell me the difference between other matter paragraph here and the other information paragraph here.
Yeah, the other information basically highlights any differences between the auditor's report and the director's report or other documents that he is not going to audit. Whereas the emphasis of matter paragraphs, it mainly highlights those matters which have been of importance but have not been able to feature in the key audit matters or any other place, but they are still important, and it is mainly for non-listed entities.
Not absolutely right. And I
Is that
asked
correct?
about the other matter. No.
Okay, the other matters paragraph. Sorry.
Even emphasis of matter paragraph was not correct.
What's emphasis of matter paragraph on that?
I Guys, anyone else wants to try? You can.
Ma'am, other matter paragraph are includes those matters that are not presented or disclosed in the financial statement, basically.
Yeah, that is other matter.
And
Any examples about that, or
Yes, ma'am, I think
what
that's
is
the
the-
basic difference between other information and other matters. Other matters is those that have not been disclosed. Other information is basically inconsistency. Example would be
See, firstly, let's take it one by one. Other information means anything apart from the financial statements. Like I took the example of the chairman's report. Chairman's report is other information. Other information means something that is not audited, that is not under the scope of audit. Like chairman's report was not under the scope of audit, only financial statements were under the scope of audit. So this becomes other information, right? Is that clear?
yes, ma'am.
Then we have emphasis of matter paragraph means, see, when will you emphasize something? When something is already given, will you be able to emphasize on that? So emphasis of matter paragraph means something that is already mentioned in the financial statements, but the auditor still feels the need to emphasize on that. It is already mentioned in the financial statements, but the auditor feels the need to emphasize on that. For example, let's say we are saying that
ma'am, subsequent events.
subsequent events can be there. Any major event, let's say I am into a lawsuit with a particular customer, and if I lose this lawsuit, right, I will incur heavy losses, and my entity might not be a going concern. Or if not, if we are not going that far also, if I lose this lawsuit, then the share prices of my company are going to go down because the losses are going to be huge. Now, this is something that is already, let's say, disclosed in the financial statements. In the contingent liability, the management has disclosed that we are facing so and so lawsuit. But the auditor feels that there is a need to emphasize on this, even though the management has given this, the users need to be made more aware. So that time they will include the emphasis of matter paragraph. Right? Then what is the other matter paragraph? Other matter paragraph is something that is again not included in the financial statements, but according to the auditor, it's very important to be communicated to the users. Like the restriction that I place on my audit report is mentioned in the other matter paragraph. For example, when I want to write that this audit report is for the use of shareholders of so and so company and nobody else, this will go in the other matter paragraph. Because obviously this is not mentioned in the financial statements, right? Because this is some information that the auditor wants to convey to the users, that this is meant only for the shareholders. So this statement or this line will go in the other matter paragraph. Is that understood? Are the three paragraphs clear?
Yes,
Any questions?
Ma'am, EOMP is for non-listed company or both? Listed or non-listed? Ma'am, sorry, ma'am, you are not audible.
Can be for both, Shruti. Can be for both.
So, ma'am, question is there. If there is an uncertainty regarding a material future outcome of a litigation in a listed company, so where this will be appear?
It will appear in the financial statements and then you will put it under emphasis of matter paragraph.
Ma'am,
Like,
not
is it
in CAB.
disclosed?
We can consider it as a disclosed. Ma'am, I want the answer related to disclosed or non-disclosed in both aspects.
Will be disclosed in both aspects. It will be disclosed.
No, ma'am. She's asking if
No,
it is
ma'am.
disclosed, what's the next thing, and if it's not disclosed, what happens?
Yeah.
If it's disclosed, then even then it is going to be an unmodified opinion, right? Because it is disclosed, and you have to then put it under emphasis of matter paragraph in both. And if it's not disclosed, it's modified. Your opinion will be modified.
But the paragraph will remain same, EOMP.
No, EOMP is only issued under
unmodified. Yes, ma'am.
EOMP is only for unmodified opinion.
Unmodified opinion.
Yeah, it is only additional communication for unmodified opinion. Is that okay? Is that clear?
Ma'am, but I will not say like when we have a college training for AA, Venkat sir will have taken this training. So he said that EOMP is for non-listed entities only.
That's written in certain areas, ma'am, but it is for
Yes,
both.
ma'am.
But it is for both. Yeah, even I had that. It is for both.
Don't worry about it. It is for both. You pick up like these audit reports are available online. It's a public document. You pick up the document of some listed companies. I'm sure you're going to find out emphasis of matter paragraph if it's needed in that particular company. It will be there. It's not like it's only for non-listed companies.
Okay, ma'am.
But yeah, it will come only when it is unmodified. For modified, you do not have emphasis of matter or anything. Then you just have the basis of opinion paragraph and give reasons, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then we have types of modified opinions. I'm sure you have done this before. When it is material and not pervasive, you issue a qualified opinion using except for. And if there is an inability to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, even then the same thing, qualified opinion except for. When it is material and pervasive, and there is a material misstatement, you give an adverse opinion that the financial statements do not give a true and fair view. And when it is material and pervasive, but you are not able to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, then you give disclaimer of opinion, that is, we do not express an opinion on this. Right? I'm hoping this is taken care of. There's no issue with this. Then we have reporting implications. Again, I discussed specifically about the going concern, right? It is a repetition of that. Please read this, right? And read the impact on the opinion. Ask if there are any questions. These are just different cases. Like even I took the cases, right? Wherein I said that it is not a going concern, but it's mentioned it is, etc. Same logic, same situations, and the impact, right? Let me know if there are any questions on this. Give it a quick read.
I'm done.
Questions? Okay, I'm moving forward. Reporting to those charged with governance. What are the matters that we communicate to those charged with governance, right? So there are various things. Request that all identified misstatements be amended. The wording of expected modifications. So, you should tell the management and those charged with governance as to what are you going to write in your audit report, so that if you're giving a modified opinion, they can make changes in the financial statements and present a true and fair view, so that you can then give an unmodified opinion, right? It's not a test that you just test them and give them the final report. You give them a chance to make changes in their financial statements, so that later it makes sense and you can give an unmodified report. Significant matters already communicated with management, right? For example, if there is a fraud in the organization, you've found that out, you've communicated to the management, and if you feel that the management is also involved, colluded in the fraud, you will need to communicate that to those charged with governance. Auditor's responsibility in relation to the audit, planned scope and timing of the audit, right? When are we planning to complete the audit, etc. Views regarding significant accounting practices and policies, significant difficulties encountered during the audit, let's say the management was not cooperating, etc. That needs to be communicated. Request for written representation, matters relevant to auditor independence, because those charged with governance has to make sure that the auditors are independent. So all the matters, whether they hold any shares in a particular organization, everything should be communicated to those charged with governance, so that independence is intact. Right? Any questions, guys, so far?
No.
Okay. Then we have audit related services. Right. Now, these are some new areas that you would have touched upon in AAA, right? So we have assurance engagements. Assurance engagements we have already done, right? Wherein we provide an assurance to the intended users. Now that can be limited or reasonable. We do not provide absolute assurance. So we have some services, audit related services also, that we'll be studying. We have different chapters coming up, right? So financial statement review, this is your limited review, limited assurance that you will be providing. Then we have interim review of financial statements, that is between the year review. Then we have due diligence and social and environmental report reviews. If needed, there is integrated reporting that is required. If you have to comment on how the company is impacting the environment, about their carbon footprint, etc., that will go under social and environmental report. Then you have forensic audit, verifying insurance claim, and due diligence, right? So firstly, we have audits and we have related services. For audit, we know that we provide, so this is the nature of service: assurance provide and report provided. So in audit, we provide reasonable assurance, but not 100% or absolute assurance. We give a positive assurance on assertion, that is, in our view or in our opinion, the financial statements present a true and fair view or do not present a true and fair view, whatever it is, we give a positive assurance. Review, if you remember from the first chapter, it is limited assurance, that is a lesser degree of assurance than reasonable, and you give a negative assurance on assertions. That is, if you remember the language, it says nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe that the financial statements do not present a true and fair view. So the language is negative, right? If you remember, nothing has come to our attention. That is the language of limited assurance. And in our opinion, the financial statements present a true and fair view. This is a positive assurance. Then we have agreed upon procedures, that is due diligence, forensic audits, etc. There is no assurance that is provided. We just provide factual finding of the procedures. There is no level of assurance. So when I'm carrying out an investigation, I'm just going to give you the facts of the case and you are going to draw your own conclusions. I'm not going to give you any level of assurance. Right? So now we have step by step, we have review of interim financial information. We are also going to do forensic. We are also going to do due diligence, right? So first is review engagement. You have to plan with professional skepticism, right? Now, if you remember, review engagements are not going to give you a reasonable level of assurance. Forget absolute. Absolute is not into question. We don't have a reasonable level of assurance. We only get a limited level of assurance, which is lesser than your reasonable assurance as well. So we are not going to perform any in-depth procedures like we used to perform for reasonable assurance, right? We used to perform substantive procedures. We used to perform test of controls. But here, because the level of assurance that you want to give is relatively less, your procedures do not have to be so much in detail. So the procedures that are normally performed are inquiries and analytical procedures. So you just see whether everything, like I said, is making sense or not, right? You check the entire financial statements, do some ratio analysis. If all that is okay, you can give a reasonable assurance. Sorry, limited assurance.
Limited assurance.
Then we have prospective financial information. Prospective financial information. Prospective means about the future, right? So a reporting accountant may be asked to provide an opinion on prospective or future financial information in the form of a forecast and projection, right? So generally, if you see, audit is done of the historical financial statements. So something that has already happened, that is usually audited. But you might also be asked to provide an opinion on the forecast that is there, on the futuristic information. So PFI, financial information based on assumptions about events that may occur in the future and possible actions by the entity. Prospective financial information is based on management expectations, that is, best estimate assumptions. PFI based on hypothetical assumptions about future events that may or may not take place, or based on a combination of best estimate and hypothetical assumptions. Prior to acceptance of a PFI engagement, the auditor must consider the intended user and whether the information will be for general or limited distribution, the nature of assumptions, best estimate or hypothetical, and elements to be included and period covered, right? So if you understand this slide, it's very easy. Basically, generally you are required to do an audit of historical information, but at times you will be required to provide an opinion on the forecast. That is, whatever forecast or future information the management has provided, you need to give your opinion on that. So that also is allowed. You can give an opinion on that. And before accepting that engagement, you need to see what are the assumptions that the management has taken, whether it's the best estimate or a hypothetical assumption, right? Best estimate means most likely scenario, whether it's that case, or hypothetical means they are assuming something and doing, like they are not really considering the probabilities of something happening, right? Who are going to be the intended users? Who is going to use my opinion on the PFI? Right? And the elements to be included and period covered. All these areas are going to be considered before you can actually give an opinion on the prospective financial information.
I'm accepting any of these assurance engagements, limited assurance engagements, opens us up to self-interest threat in terms of fees and management threat. Like we are not supposed to make decisions, but there is a risk there, an ethical risk.
See, we are not making the decision, right? In the prospective financial information also, the management is making the forecast. I am only assessing the reasonableness of that forecast and giving my opinion.
So is there a management threat, ma'am, in this case?
No, not at all.
That,
Because see,
yeah.
when would there be a management threat? When we are preparing the forecast. That time there is a management threat because my personal bias, my assumption, I am making decisions for the management. That is a problem. But if you are preparing something and giving it to me, and when I'm checking it, it's not really creating any sort of a management threat also.
Management threat. It just might be a self-interest threat here. If our fee
Not
level
even
might
self-interest.
like, because if you're providing an additional service, we might charge them more, and if we are charging them more, our fee might increase, and if our fee might increase, they will be an important client to us, and we might not be objective. So I'm just curious, ma'am, does it? What do you
Not
think? Is it a threat?
Not really, because
Okay.
see, in the end, even the audit firms, they are doing business, right?
Yeah.
I need to, like, I want to increase my fees. I want to get as many, I want to give as many services that I can to the client, right? So that should not ideally be impacting my interest as much, my independence as much, because anyway this is about the future. It is not related to what I'm auditing. Plus, if I'm giving different teams for both the activities, for both the services, it should not be that much of a problem, because anyway they are not quite related. The forecast is going to be probably used by the management. It is not a public document, right?
Yes.
It is going to be used by the management for their future uses. They just want to see whether it's reasonable or not. And the audit document is going to be used by people overall. So there is no real overlapping involved here that could lead to a self-interest threat.
Correct, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, Laksh, allowed and disallowed services do come into the picture here, right? But it's not really related. It is not really creating a self-review threat or anything. Historical, and what we are assessing here is about the future. So this is allowed. This is a service that you can provide. Okay. So you have to design the procedures to assess the reasonableness of the assumptions used to prepare the forecast. See, what are we doing here? Are we preparing the forecast? Had we been preparing the forecast, it would be a major problem, right? We would be assuming management responsibilities. We would be doing the management's job, but that is not happening here. The forecast is prepared by the management, and we are only checking whether the estimates or the assumptions that they have taken, whether they are fair or not. For example, in today's time, if let's say a particular company let's say,
Amazon.
sorry,
Amazon.
Amazon. Fine. Let's take up Amazon. If Amazon is forecasting a growth rate, so let's say its current growth rate is 5%, and in the current year it's forecasting a growth rate of 10 to 20%, right? As an auditor, let's say 20%, do you think it's reasonable given the current situation?
Yeah, the revenues might grow, man.
How?
Like you mean by given the current situation, you mean the COVID? Yeah, ma'am. I think people are more home, so they might be purchasing more as compared to otherwise getting everything online and not going out. Even the small grocery products, things like that, probably using Amazon Pay. So I think the revenue might go up. But yeah, I get the point, ma'am. I get the point.
Right. So,
Yeah.
okay, let's not, if we don't take an ed tech or, if
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
say,
Yeah.
or if I take up a pharmaceutical company, again, the revenues will go up.
Grow
But
up.
if I take a routine business, let's say our offline colleges,
Travel and tourism. Exactly.
travel and tourism,
Yeah.
hospitality, all these are going
Correct.
to, at this point in time, assuming an growth rate will be unreasonable,
Unreasonable.
right?
Yes.
So that is all that we have to assess as an auditor. This is a kind of service that we are providing as an expert. It's not really, we are not doing any forecast. We are just
Yes, ma'am.
assessing whether it's reasonable or not. Right?
Yes.
That is there. Have new revenues and cost receipts and payments, have the new ones been included? Have discontinuing revenues and cost receipts been excluded? Are the revenues, cost receipts and payments expected to continue been included and adjusted for inflation or loan charges, right? When you're talking about forecast, you also take into account the discounting factor. That is, the value of a rupee today will not be as valuable tomorrow. Discounting factor has to be taken into consideration because of the inflation. Does the forecast add up? That is, does the forecast make sense? Is it real? Is it reasonable? Have management been good at forecasting in the past? You can check their past forecasts, see if they have been accurate in the recent times or not. So these are the different procedures that the auditor needs to perform. If you see, this is just an additional service that the auditor is providing. There is no threat that is arising as such.
Yes.
Now we're going to read about due diligence. What is due diligence?
Fact finding. Non-assurance service.
Yes. What exactly do we do in due diligence?
Like if there's a company that we are interested in purchasing, so we just tell our auditors, or we might hire them here to find out about the companies in various aspects, not just financial, otherwise as well.
Ma'am, it's like a client screening. Basically, we get the info regarding all over the client, or we are going to purchase the firm, so regarding the company.
Right. So before you acquire or purchase a company, you want to know about the overall company. It should not be such that you acquire the company and then you're coming to know about some contingent liability that was not included in the balance sheet, and later on you're coming to know. Or if they're facing some litigation that was not mentioned, or if they have some huge guarantees that they have taken, on behalf of some other company, they've taken guarantees and that company is faltering on payment, and that is why they have to pay now. So all these problems are going to arise if you directly purchase the company. It's very important that you do your due diligence before acquiring a company. Even before you make an investment, like I don't know if you guys invest in shares or anything, but if you do, you cannot just look at the balance sheet and invest. You have to like do your due diligence. You have to see what the company has done in the past, what does the future prospect looks like, right? And whether there is any chance that your investment might go futile. So, minimizing the risk of a bad investment, providing assurance to the purchaser of a company before the investment is made, aims to find information relevant to the acquisition that would affect the decision whether to purchase and the purchase price, like what should be the purchase price, etc. Because accounting is a funny concept, you can really do whatever you like in accounting, because if I am using some different method of accounting, if I measure my inventory using the FIFO method, if I go to the LIFO method, my inventory might be valued at a very different price. So I can basically try and manipulate my financial statements as much. And it is very important that before you make an investment, your due diligence is in place so that you know what you're getting into and you are paying the fair price for that purchase and not more, right? So that is the reason we get the due diligence done. Most of these big fours, right? All the big fours, in fact, they have a separate due diligence department which specializes in this, wherein the acquiring company, they want more information, they want to do a due diligence assurance on the particular target company, and we go ahead and we check whether whatever the target company is showing is fair or not, and whether it is a good target to acquire or not, right?
Yes.
So very important, these are the matters that are considered under due diligence. Obviously, the financial performance and position in the industry, the operational matters, market position and commercial matters, legal matters if they're involved in any legal matters, let's say some copyright issues, etc., that needs to be taken care of, tax matters and HR matters, all these things. So if you ask me the difference between an audit and a due diligence, most important is that audit only relates to financial performance and position, right? But in due diligence, we don't just look at that, we do look at many other aspects, right?
You need more competence here.
Sorry.
Like in order to assess the different areas, we need more competence here.
Definitely. For being an auditor, you just need competency in finance. Here, you need much more than that. Right. That's why, these firms, they do not hire interns in due diligence. So you can never, like when you qualify ACC also, you cannot directly enter the due diligence department. First, you have to work as an auditor in, as a trainee, etc., maybe for 3 to 4 years. And only after that level of work experience will you be able to work in due diligence, because the level of competency is much higher.
Yes.
Right. Then we have benefits of due diligence. Obviously, you can think of the benefits, no? So that there are no surprises and shocks later on. That is the major reason why I will get a due diligence done, right? Please read this. This is just, an acronym also for the benefits of diligence. Quickly read these. Ask me if there are any questions on this. Pretty basic, actually.
A little unrelated, ma'am. I read something yesterday on disclaiming an opinion. What does it mean? Is it any different from giving a negative opinion? What is disclaiming an opinion?
Disclaimer of opinion?
Disclaim our opinion. We are disclaiming our opinion.
That
okay,
means
that
disclaimer
okay.
of opinion.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yes, guys, done. Am I audible?
No, ma'am, you're not loud enough.
Any better now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. What are forensic audits?
It says investigation of a suspected fraudulent activity. Again, a
Forensic.
fact finding, non-assurance giving
Good, good.
engagement.
So again, right, it is a fraud investigation. Most of the audit firms, they have a separate forensics department. It's more to do with, when the fraud has already been identified, to analyze who committed the fraud, for how long it's going on, right? How it was concealed, why did the auditors not know about it, did they perform sufficient and appropriate reviews, etc. All that is carried out in a fraud investigation. So the type of fraud and how it was, how it was concealed, how it was happening also, who all were involved, the quantification of that, right? So all that is done in a forensics or fraud investigation department. The type of fraud that has occurred, how long it has been occurring, how it was concealed, and the main suspects. Quantification of the financial losses, gathering evidence to support legal action or recovery of the losses, and providing advice, to prevent fraud. That is, in the future, what should be done? What are some controls that the organization can put in place so that this fraud doesn't happen again, right? All these are the different activities that are performed by a fraud investigation department. Insurance claim, you'll already know, right? The value, the loss suffered by the entity, to be claimed from the insurance company. For example, for theft or fraud or business interruption, the loss of profit due to the business interruption because of fire or flood, even, because of the pandemic, the companies who have, claimed insurance against some calamities, against the pandemic, etc., and because their business has remained shut for quite some time, the entities which have remained insured, they have been at a benefit. They have been, recovering their money from the insurance companies. For theft,
There's an insurance for pandemic.
Yes, there is an insurance for natural calamities, and it totally depends on the types of insurance that is offered. But if it is against the natural calamities, they often include the pandemic also. The pandemic is also included in that. So for example, before we had the swine flu, we have so it is against that also. Not all, it depends on the type of insurance you're taking. If it's a blanket insurance, then it will cover the pandemic also. Right? Then we have theft, that is value of the assets stolen from the company. And fraud, you have to quantify the loss as a result of fraud. So if you've taken insurance against these, you will be able to get your claims from the insurance company. So this is basically hedging your risk, transferring the liability or the loss to some other, outsourcing the loss is basically the function of insurance. Then we also have audit of social, environmental, and integrated reporting. See, this is not compulsory as of now. It is not mandatory. For now, what is mandatory is your financial audit, but definitely in the years to come, even your social, environmental, and integrated reporting is going to become mandatory, wherein the auditors will be required to report on the social and environmental aspects of the different companies as well. Right now, do you know what KPIs are generally? Key performance indicators, what do they mean?
A metric of effectiveness.
Good.
We measure the performance of the organization against it. Or
Good,
probably the
good.
organization measures it against its own KPI. We can judge the performance and the KPI.
Do you have some examples for KPIs?
KPIs, yeah. It comes from this 3 E's value audit, ma'am, like economy, effectiveness, and
See?
efficiency. So under effectiveness, we set metrics. So one could be the number of jobs that a student gets from when he passes out of a college. So the percentage of students getting placed is a metric if the college is effective. So the number of people getting placed could be a metric. And since I know it is not for an organization, but
That's fine.
sorry, ma'am, no example for organization.
Okay, tell me the normal key performance indicators, guys. Others for an organization, how do you measure performance of an organization? Sales growth, good. What else?
We had measured against the forecast, ma'am. Like what we had in the starting of the year, we had forecasted the sales would be this much. Budgeted. That's the better word. Against budgeted results. Measuring our results against forecast of budgeted results. But again, the industry average, past year performance.
Okay. Laksh is saying market share, position, and customer base. Yes. Even gross profit is a KPI, right? Productivity measures. Okay. So KPIs, like Rishabh said, these are the different ways in which you can measure the performance of your organization, right? There can be financial KPIs also, there can be non-financial KPIs also. For example, if the customers, the repeated sales, if customers are coming back to your organization, it is a key performance indicator of your goodwill, right? If they are coming back to your organization, repeated sales, if they are happening. So we can have both financial KPIs and non-financial KPIs. If the people, that is the workers of your organization, they are staying in your organization, there is low labor turnover, that means that they are happy with the organization. Even that is a key performance indicator. So companies publish KPIs in their annual reports to demonstrate good corporate and social responsibilities. Auditors may provide assurance over the KPIs. Exam questions may ask for KPIs and for evidence to support the KPIs.
What can be an evidence, ma'am? What is an evidence that supports a KPI?
A key performance indicator, and then for that, if you obtain an evidence, for example, the attendance, the log of the employees, that is for how long the employees are serving, the payroll log will be an evidence to the KPI that the employees are satisfied and they are staying on for a longer time.
So evidence is a source document, right?
Yes, it is a source document that corroborates your,
So the log book or the log register is an evidence for the KPI.
Yes. CSF supports KPI. Okay, do you guys know what CSFs are? Critical success factors. Okay.
Yes,
Daksh,
these are the ones that drive KPIs.
drive KPIs. Is that correct?
Basically, these are the measures which we to know how well the KPIs are working. Am I wrong?
What are critical success factors? First, explain that.
Basically, these are the factors that enable organization to work well. Like, let's take their operations are going well because of so and so subsidiary or something. That is a critical success factor.
A critical success factor, like the name suggests, it's something that is critical to the success of an organization. So if you do not have this in place, then your organization cannot be successful. For example, if I open a cafe tomorrow or a restaurant tomorrow, good quality food becomes a critical success factor for my organization. If I do not have good quality food, my organization, my cafe will not run. It will not go on for a long time. It becomes a critical success factor. The KPIs are used to measure the critical success factors. That is, how well am I, how well am I doing my job? Where are my critical success factors at as of now? So KPIs, that is key performance indicators, like I said, if the customers are coming back to the restaurant to eat, that is a KPI
KPI.
that is actually an indicator that the quality of food, that is my critical success factor, is good. So KPIs are used to measure CSFs. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it does. I mistook it the other way around.
Yeah. I think most of y'all, someone else also said, I think Laksh also said CSF supports KPI, and then he realized, and then he's saying KPIs are based on CSF. So, yeah. So KPIs are measures that matter to the company: staff turnover percentage, percentage wastage, percentage reduction in water or power usage, donation to charity, number of training days provided to the staff, and number of hours volunteered to charity. These can be, and you can have numerous KPIs. Basically, your KPIs, however, are going to be based on the CSFs. That is, the measures that matter to the company. Matter to the company means that are critical to the success of the organization. So they are based on the CSFs. Then we have the difficulties, the measurement difficulties and reporting difficulties. Okay. Now we are talking about the difficulties with KPIs. KPIs may not be specific enough to measure accurately, right? When I'm talking about, let's say, the goodwill, and if I want to measure the goodwill, all I can do is repeated sales, but that might not be the best way to measure. It's not specific enough to accurately measure my goodwill. Accountants lack the specific skills and experience needed to assess many environmental and social matters. For example, it appears unlikely that an auditor would be able to measure carbon emissions or energy consumption, right? So that is a reporting difficulty. This is measurement difficulty. This is a reporting difficulty. Obviously, I hope you understand that both are not related, right? We are just reading it like that. The concept involved may lack precise definition. I'll read it like this only. And the systems and controls may not be in place to capture such information reliably. Reporting difficulty, that is because the auditors are supposed to, or the accountants are supposed to report on the environment and social footprints or emissions. These are the responsibilities, that is potential for manipulation to achieve the desired result, especially given the subjectivity of the subject matter. So there is no real way in which you can measure what impact you're having on the environment, what impact you're having on the society, because these are not exactly quantifiable. So there's this huge scope of potential for manipulation to achieve whatever results you want, and evidence may not be sufficient or appropriate for the purpose of providing assurance. So these are the difficulties that we are facing with that the accountant is facing with reporting on the environment and the social aspects of a particular organization. Firstly, there are measurement difficulties. You cannot really measure the impact that the organizations have on the society and the environment. And even if you can measure, you're not able to report it properly because you are not the subject matter expert, and because there is a lot of subjectivity involved in the whole concept. You cannot communicate with precision that they are presenting a true and fair view, or they are like contributing so much to the environment, there is no carbon footprint, there is no pollution, etc. So sometimes you might not have the required evidence also to be able to comment on that. Right? Is this understood? Is this slide clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So Lakshya is saying these are quantified in terms of carbon credits. Yes. So we do quantify some things related to the environment. So carbon footprint has now come into picture, but still there are a lot of areas like you cannot really measure the pollution you're causing to the water or the noise pollution. There is no way of measuring that. So the measurement difficulties still exist, right? But yeah, that's true that for carbon, we have come up with a way to measure the carbon footprint.
Now, aren't the experts going to do that? We have to just take their report, assess if they are fine, and then just put it in the in our report. We can't even put that.
Exactly. Like we did before also, know that you cannot completely just rely on the work of someone else. You have to evaluate what they are doing. So even for that, we are not well equipped. We are not the subject matter expert to be able to review the work of others also, because it's going to be very technical.
So the valuation part should never be our concern. You have to just make sure that the person who's valuing it is certified, qualified, independent. That's all.
But as of now, this is not a mandatory requirement, right? So actually, there are no environmental and social audits going on. And since we are auditing, right, we do not really have people who are going to do it for us. And like as of now, we are only doing it if we are doing any additional responsibility. We do not really have people to do it for us, since it's not a mandatory requirement as of now. The day it becomes mandatory, of course, we are going to have experts doing it for us, and we will just have to see whether that has been done properly or not.
Yes.
Right. Then we have environmental and social auditing. Measuring the effects of environmental matters is problematic because there's a possible time lag between event occurring and being identified, right? So if you so global warming is happening now. It's not because we started polluting the environment yesterday. We've been doing it over the years, and now the result has shown up. So that is the problem with most of the environmental problems, that the problem is not, or the event is not going to be immediate. It is going to happen over a period of time. Accounting estimates are subject to assumptions. Environmental laws are evolving and subject to interpretation, because nothing as of now related to environment or society is mandatory in nature. It's still evolving. Liabilities arising from legal constructive obligations, but also from perceived moral obligations. So it's not just legal obligation, but also, when you are working in a society, when you're working in midst of the environment, you have to not just look at things which are, legally binding on you, but also morally binding on you. So you should, not pollute the environment. You should not pollute the water bodies around you, even if there is no legal foundation on you as of now. Appropriate audit procedures will include incorporate environmental concerns in the planning procedures of the audit. Inquire of management as to any systems or controls are in place to identify, risk, evaluate, control, and account for environmental matters. Obtain written representations from the management. Review board minutes. Include environmental matters in review of appropriateness of going concern. Right? So these are the different matters that can be involved when you are carrying on an environmental or social audit. Right? As of now, it's not necessary, like it's not mandatory, so no one does it. Then we have audit of performance information in the public sector audit. So audit of performance information in public sector. So you have performance information, planning, reporting. It's pretty much the same, even in the public sector, right? Measurability, existence, it pretty much remains the same like it is in the private sector. Nothing specific to do here. Do you want me to talk about anything out here?
What's the difference between performance audit and audit of performance information? Primarily.
Talking about.
Ma'am, you're not audible.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, ma'am, I can.
Yeah. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yes, ma'am. A performance audit and audit of performance information. Now I got the audit of performance information. Just what is a performance audit?
Performance audit relates with the operations. So basically, whatever processes an entity is taking up, whether those processes are efficient or not, that is considered under performance audit. That is, if any activities are unnecessary and if you want to remove it, any activities are inefficient, removing that is under performance audit.
We check the operations, and here we check the information regarding the operation.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
And we have insolvency. This is the last slide for the revision. Now, insolvency, have you done this?
I think we don't have it, ma'am. Just for UK syllabus.
Yes, ma'am.
I like to do it anyway. It is just for additional knowledge, but I think I will skip it because I don't think I want to give additional knowledge in the revision lecture. What do you think? Like, it's not examinable for sure. So.
Does it no harm?
I mean, I would just say that once you're done with the paper, you should read about the insolvency, and not just this, but in India also we have an insolvency and bankruptcy code that has come up, and it's interesting, and I think you guys should know it. The process of liquidation, it just doesn't happen overnight. And what is the process of insolvency? If you want to file for insolvency, what is the list of creditors, like what is the hierarchy in which you have to pay your creditors, etc. It's an interesting read. You should read it once you're done with your exam.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Great. So this is it about the material, the study material that we had to revise. This is it. So like we planned, the last 2 days I wanted to do the questions. So that is it. Going to be starting with the questions tomorrow. If you have Any specific areas that you want me to take up more questions on, please let me know. I'll bring up more questions on that. Yes.
Ma'am, how we go for the questions like
I lost your voice, Shruti.
ma'am, how we do the questions from exam kit or past papers?
So I was thinking like tomorrow we can do exam kit and then we can pick up a past paper the day after. But do you guys want something like, do you want the past papers only or do you want the exam kit only? If that is the case, I can take that up also.
No, I think anything is fine.
Fine, then I will plan. I will see
Yeah.
whichever questions cover the entire syllabus. I will pick up the best questions and bring it. That can be your past paper questions also, can be your exam kit questions also. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Fine, guys. I think we're done with the revision. I hope you feel a little confident about the chapters now.
Yes, I'm more clear.
Yes, ma'am. And with the questions, you'll be able to do it. You'll be able to be more confident. Sorry, also. So that's the aim. Right. Great. This is it, guys. If you have any questions, please shoot. Otherwise, we are done for the day. We'll pick up questions tomorrow.
Ma'am, I have a question. Ma'am, so I have not gotten to reading all the technical articles yet, but I just wanted to know if any of the technical articles cover the information in the exposure drafts that are, given as part of examinable documents, or do I have to like search for the exposure drafts and read them separately?
Exposure draft is just very easy. You can just go to the study text and control F exposure draft and just read up on it, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and if you have any doubts, you can get back to me also. In case you don't understand, I'll explain also. It's not a very lengthy area too.
Sure, ma'am. Sure. Thank you.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rishabh.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shruti.
Thank you for the lecture, ma'am.